Metaphysical Manifesto, Audiobook Edition. The Broadcast, The Blood Test, and the Frequency War. By John Zerga Jr., The Heavy Metal Prophet. Part 1 of 4, Preamble. The Philosopher's Stance. This document is not Christian apologetics. It is not a defense of any existing orthodoxy, Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, or otherwise. It is a philosophical framework. It was built by a finite mind attempting to triangulate the infinite. It uses every available witness. It submits to none of them absolutely. Let me state the position plainly. First, God is infinite. No finite text, no human language, no institutional tradition can contain or perfectly describe his nature, his will, or his plan. The Apostle Paul wrote it plainly, for now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. The finite mind cannot comprehend the infinite. This is not a religious claim. It is a logical one. Language itself is finite. It cannot capture infinite concepts. We make do with what we have. Words on pages, reports of encounters, traditions passed down. All of them are partial. None of them are final. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein closed his Tractatus Logico Philosophicus with a statement that haunts every serious thinker. Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. He was right about the limit. He was wrong about the response. We cannot be silent about God. We can only speak with humility, knowing our words are fingers pointing at the moon, not the moon itself. Immanuel Kant made the same point from a different angle. He distinguished between the phenomenal world, the world as it appears to us through our senses and cognitive structures, and the noumenal world, the world as it is in itself. God, Kant argued, belongs to the noumenal. We cannot access him through pure reason. We can only approach him through practical reason, through moral experience, through the lived reality of conscience. Kant was not an atheist. He was an epistemic realist. He knew the limits of the instrument. Thomas Aquinas, the great synthesizer of faith and reason, arrived at the same conclusion by a different road. After his mystical experience near the end of his life, he stopped writing. He said of his massive theological output, the Summa Theologica, the Summa contra Gentiles, thousands of pages of the most rigorous philosophical theology ever produced, all that I have written seems to me like straw compared to what has been revealed to me. The greatest theological mind of the medieval period recognized that his life's work was a finger pointing, not the thing itself. This is the philosopher's starting point, epistemic humility. We are finite. Our instruments are finite. Our conclusions are provisional. Second, all religious texts are finite human attempts to describe encounters with the infinite. They are pointers. They are not containers. They are maps. They are not territory. They are the menu. They are not the meal. The 66-book Protestant canon, the 73-book Catholic canon, the 81-book Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo canon, the Nag Hammadi Library, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Pseudepigrapha, the Quran, all of these are witnesses. All of them contain data. None of them is the thing itself. To claim that any particular collection of texts perfectly and exhaustively captures the mind of God is what philosophers call a category error. The map is not the destination. The description is not the described. The word, water, will not quench your thirst. Third, the philosopher's task is not to submit to one tradition. It is to triangulate across all of them. Using reason, logic, and the test of internal coherence, the philosopher compiles the reports, identifies the patterns, and builds the metaphysical architecture that explains the most data with the fewest contradictions. This is not relativism. The claim is not that all perspectives are equally true. It is that all perspectives are partially true. The truth is what survives the coherence test. Fourth, the blind men and the elephant is the correct epistemic model. You know the story. 6 blind men encounter an elephant. One feels the leg and says the elephant is like a tree trunk. One feels the tail and says it is like a rope. One feels the trunk and says it is like a snake. One feels the ear and says it is like a fan. One feels the flank and says it is like a wall. One feels the tusk and says it is like a spear. All of them are touching the same reality. None of them can see the whole. All of them are partially right. All of them are partially wrong. The Orthodox Christian canon is one blind man feeling the elephant's flank and saying, the truth is broad and warm. The Gnostic texts are another blind man feeling the elephant's rough leg and saying, the truth is harsh and unyielding. The Ethiopian canon with its 88 books is another blind man feeling the elephant's ear and saying, the truth is thin and flexible. The philosopher walks around the elephant. He compiles the reports. He builds the best model of what the elephant actually is. Fifth, the framework stands or falls on its internal logic and explanatory power. It is not validated by conformity to creed or council. It is validated by whether it makes coherent sense of the data. What data? The data of Scripture in all its canonical diversity. The data of non-canonical texts, Gnostic, pseudepigraphal, Ethiopian, Quranic. The data of human experience, suffering, death, decay, perception, free will, love, beauty, the sense of the numinous. The data of reason, logic, cause and effect, the nature of perfection, the problem of evil. The philosopher William James, in The Varieties of Religious Experience, argued that religious experiences should be judged by their fruits, not their roots. A religious claim is validated not by its origin but by its effects, by whether it produces coherent lives, moral action, psychological integration. James was not a theologian. He was a pragmatist, but his method is sound. Test the framework by what it does. Test it by whether it explains the data. Sixth, all existing religious institutions are, by nature, finite and potentially corrupt. No church, no council, no tradition escapes the human condition. To assume that any existing institution possesses the complete and uncorrupted truth is to assume what must be proved. The sociologist Max Weber described the routinization of charisma, the process by which the explosive, revolutionary insight of a founder becomes institutionalized, bureaucratized, and eventually weaponized by the institution that claims to preserve it. This is not a bug. It is a feature of human organization. Every religion begins with a fire. Every religion ends with an institution managing the ashes and selling tickets to the viewing. The philosopher begins from a position of epistemic humility. We are all finite. We are all prone to error. We are all feeling different parts of the elephant. The framework proposed here does not claim finality. It claims coherence. The central thesis. Here it is. In plain language, there is one God. He is incorporeal. He is infinite. He is the ground of being. God created one reality. It is good. It is abundant. It is everlasting. This reality is the garden. It still exists. It never left. There is also a counterfeit frequency. It is a perceptual overlay. It occupies the same spatial coordinates as God's reality. It operates on an entirely different meaning system. This frequency was originated by the dragon, who is Satan. It was institutionalized by the beast, who is the Antichrist. And it is broadcast by the demiurge, who is the false prophet. This counterfeit frequency is the frequency of lack, of scarcity, of fear, of decay, of death. It is sensorially indistinguishable from God's reality. The same tree, the same bread, the same sun, but the meaning is inverted. Abundance becomes scarcity, trust becomes fear, gift becomes threat. Human beings possess two receivers, the senses and the spirit. The senses receive the demiurge's broadcast. The spirit receives God's frequency. Free will operates at the point of the dial. Faith is the act of tuning the spirit receiver to God's reality. The blood test is faith. The war is over which frequency the soul trusts. The Christ event is the frequency hack. The logos enters the counterfeit. He overrides the interference. He demonstrates, through his life, his death, and his resurrection, that the broadcast has no authority over the Son. His resurrection is the definitive blood test. It condemns the copy. It vindicates the original. This framework is neither Gnostic dualism nor Christian orthodoxy. It is a perceptual metaphysics. It honors the Gnostic observation, the experienced world of decay is real, and it is not God's direct creation. It also honors the biblical revelation. God made the world good, Christ entered it in flesh, the body will be resurrected, and the garden is still here. The Gnostics were right about the disease. They were wrong about the cure. This framework corrects both. Part 1. The Architecture of Reality. Chapter 1. God is being itself. God is incorporeal. He is not a being among beings. He is not the largest object in the cosmic inventory. He is being itself, the necessary foundation without which nothing contingent could stand. This is the classical theism of Augustine, Aquinas, and Maimonides. It is also the philosophical conclusion of Malebranche, Leibniz, and Pico della Mirandola. Each of these thinkers recognized, in his own idiom, that what we call reality is continuously sustained by the mind and will of God. Nicolas Malebranche argued that we see all things in God. The ideas by which we perceive objects are not generated by the objects themselves. They are directly communicated to the mind by the divine intellect. What you call seeing a tree is actually God showing you the idea of the tree. The tree is real, but your perception of it is a continuous act of divine communication. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz proposed that reality is composed of immaterial monads, soul-like units of perception and appetite. What we call matter is a well-founded phenomenon. It is the manner in which monads appear to one another. It is not an independent substance. The physical world, in Leibniz's framework, is a mode of appearing, not a separate category of being. Pico della Mirandola saw the human soul as the middle term between heaven and earth. The soul is capable of ascending by contemplation to union with the divine. It is also capable of descending into the bestial. The human being is not fixed in a chain of being. The human being is a chooser, a tuner, a dial. What unites these thinkers is the recognition that reality is fundamentally sustained by mind. If God is being and God is spirit, then reality is spiritual at its root. The word physical may name nothing more than how finite souls experience God's continuous creative act. It is a mode of appearing, not a separate category of substance. The Apostle Paul gestures toward this in the book of Hebrews. What is seen was not made out of things that are visible. The visible world is derivative. The invisible is primary. The psychologist Carl Jung, though not a theologian in any orthodox sense, spent his life documenting the reality of the invisible. He wrote, "The decisive question for man is he related to something infinite or not? That is the telling question of his life." Jung knew that the psyche cannot function without a relationship to the transcendent. If we do not have a genuine connection to the infinite, we will manufacture a counterfeit one. We will worship ideologies. We will worship leaders. We will worship our own neuroses. The religious instinct cannot be deleted. It can only be directed toward God or toward the copy. Chapter 2. The Physical World Argument. We must now make the logical case that the experienced physical world is not God's direct creation. This is the hardest pill to swallow. It sounds Gnostic. It sounds like a rejection of the body, of matter, of the goodness of creation. It is not. Stay with me. Premise 1. Everything God creates is perfect and everlasting. Decay, suffering, death, and sin are not attributes of divine creation. God does not make mistakes. God does not create the means of evil. As Scripture states, God saw everything that he had made, and, behold, it was very good. The philosopher Plato argued that the demiurge, and he used that word first, in the Timaeus, long before the Gnostics got hold of it, crafted the physical world as a copy of the eternal forms. Plato's demiurge was not evil. He was a craftsman doing his best with recalcitrant materials. But Plato recognized the same problem. The physical world is a copy. It is not the original. It is subject to decay, to change, to the erosion of time. The forms are eternal. The copies are temporary. Premise 2. The world we inhabit, the world of the senses, is a world of decay, suffering, death, and sin. It is the very vehicle through which the 7 deadly sins operate. Physical bodies are used to hurt other physical bodies. Physical scarcity drives theft, war, and oppression. Physical death terminates relationships. Physical decay corrupts everything. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer looked at this world and called it the worst of all possible worlds. He was not being dramatic. He was making a logical argument. If the world were any worse, he reasoned, it could not continue to exist. The fact that it barely continues, that it is always on the brink of collapse, always one disaster away from extinction, is evidence that it is as bad as a world can be while still existing at all. Schopenhauer was a pessimist, but he was not wrong about the data. Premise 3. A perfect God cannot create an imperfect instrument of sin. To do so would contradict his nature. The philosopher David Hume stated the problem with brutal clarity in his dialogues concerning natural religion. Is he willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he is impotent. Is he able, but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Whence then is evil? Hume's trilemma has never been satisfactorily answered by orthodox theology. The free will defense, that evil exists because God values human freedom, explains moral evil. It does not explain natural evil. It does not explain why children get cancer. It does not explain why tsunamis drown the innocent. It does not explain decay itself. Conclusion. The experienced physical world of decay and death cannot be God's direct creation. It must be something else. A counterfeit overlay. A false frequency. A perceptual distortion imposed upon God's good creation. by a lesser, malevolent intelligence. This is not the Gnostic conclusion that matter itself is evil and the body is a prison. It is the philosophical conclusion that the experienced quality of the world, its decay, its scarcity, its deathward trajectory, is not original to creation. It is parasitic upon it. God's real creation, the garden, is physical, abundant, and everlasting. What we experience through the senses is that creation filtered through the demiurge's broadcast. Same objects, inverted meaning. The Gnostic texts, read as phenomenological reports, describe this counterfeit world accurately. They are right that the world of decay is not God's direct work. They are right that a pretender spirit is at work. Where they err is in concluding that the counterfeit is the only physical world, and that salvation consists in escaping physicality itself. The correction is this: God's physical creation still exists beneath the broadcast. Salvation consists in restored perception, and ultimately, resurrected bodies on a renewed earth. Chapter 3. The Two Dimensions. Imagine two radio stations broadcasting in the same room. The same air carries both signals. The same receiver can tune to either. The room does not change. The furniture does not rearrange itself. But the voice that fills the room, the story it tells, the reality it describes, depends entirely on which frequency the receiver is tuned to. This is precisely the image Paul invokes when he describes the devil as the ruler of the kingdom of the air, the spirit who is now at work in those who are disobedient. The air is the medium of broadcast. The devil rules that medium. The spirit at work is the signal. Paul further states that the God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers, so that they cannot see the light of the gospel that displays the glory of Christ. The verb is blinded. It is a perceptual attack. The God of this age operates not by destroying the world but by distorting perception of it. The French philosopher Jean Baudrillard, in Simulacra and Simulation, described a world in which copies have replaced originals. The map precedes the territory. The simulation becomes more real than the real. Baudrillard was an atheist. He was describing late capitalism, media saturation, the hyperreal. But he accidentally described the demiurge's operation with perfect precision. The broadcast is a simulacrum. It is a copy without an original, or rather, a copy that has obscured the original so thoroughly that the original is no longer accessible to the senses. Baudrillard wrote, "The simulacrum is never that which conceals the truth. It is the truth which conceals that there is none. The simulacrum is true. The demiurge's broadcast operates exactly this way. It does not announce itself as a lie. It presents itself as the only truth. It is true, within its own frequency. The problem is that its frequency is not the only one. God's reality is the garden, abundance, provision, trust, life, the presence of the Creator. It is the reality in which, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, is not a comforting metaphor but a statement of fact. In this frequency, the tree is a gift. The bread is a providence. The body is a temple. Death is a transition. The demiurge's reality is the copy. Scarcity, lack, fear, competition, decay, extinction. It is the reality in which, take the mark or starve, is a rational calculation. Same trees, same bread, same sun, but the tree now says, winter is coming. Hoard. The bread says, you earned this alone. There is no giver. The sun says, it burns. It will kill you. Fear the sky. Death says, this is the end. There is nothing beyond me. The two dimensions are sensorially indistinguishable. The broadcast targets the senses. The senses are creaturely, limited, and, after the fall, hackable. The philosopher René Descartes, in his Meditations on First Philosophy, imagined an evil demon of the utmost power and cunning, who devoted all his energies to deceiving him. Descartes used this thought experiment to arrive at his famous conclusion: I think, therefore I am. Even if everything I perceive is a deception, the fact that I am being deceived proves that I exist. Descartes' evil demon was a philosophical tool, but it maps with eerie precision onto the demiurge. The difference is that Descartes' demon was a hypothetical. The demiurge is not. A dog perceives a different world than a shark perceives a different world than a human, all within the same spatial coordinates. The bat navigates by echolocation. The bee sees ultraviolet. The senses deliver data, not meaning. They report information, not interpretation. The demiurge hijacks the interpretation layer. He cannot change the data. The tree is still a tree, but he can change what the tree means to the perceiver. This is why the serpent's temptation in Eden is the archetype of all Demonic deception. The fruit was real fruit. It was good to the eyes. It was desirable for gaining wisdom. The sensory data was entirely accurate. The lie was in the interpretation. The serpent said, "You will not surely die. God knows that when you eat of it your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God." The serpent did not dispute the fruit's existence or its taste. He disputed its meaning. He injected a lack lie into a situation of total sufficiency. You lack God-likeness. God is holding out. Take. Secure yourself. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard, in The Concept of Anxiety, analyzed the psychology of the fall with unmatched precision. He described anxiety as the dizziness of freedom, the moment when the soul looks down into the abyss of its own possibility and becomes vertiginous. Adam, before the fall, was innocent, but innocence contains within it the possibility of its own destruction. The serpent's whisper activated that possibility. It created a lack where none existed. It made Adam feel insufficient, and the feeling of insufficiency became the reality of insufficiency. Adam and Eve took, and their eyes were opened, not to a new world, but to the demiurge's frequency, shame, fear, hiding, blame. The garden was still there. God was still walking in it. But they could no longer perceive it as home. They had tuned to the counterfeit. Chapter 4. The garden never left. The most radical implication of this framework is that the Garden of Eden never ceased to exist. It is not a lost geographical location. It is the true perceptual state, the original frequency, the way things actually are. Beneath the broadcast, Adam and Eve did not walk out of a place. They fell out of a perception. The expulsion was real, they were removed, but what was lost was not merely location, it was the ability to see the garden for what it was. The cherubim with the flaming sword symbolized the perceptual barrier. The frequency lock. No unaided human effort can reverse it. The psychologist Abraham Maslow, in his studies of what he called peak experiences, documented moments when ordinary people suddenly perceived the world as unified, meaningful, abundant, and beautiful. These experiences were transient, they faded, but they left the experiencer with an unshakable conviction that the ordinary mode of perception is not the only mode, and perhaps not the truest mode. Maslow was not a mystic. He was a secular psychologist documenting data. The data pointed to something he could not fully explain. William James, in The Varieties of Religious Experience, documented the same phenomenon across cultures and traditions. He wrote, "Our normal, waking consciousness, rational consciousness as we call it, is but one special type of consciousness, whilst all about it, parted from it by the filmiest of screens, there lie potential forms of consciousness entirely different." James knew that the screen was thin. He knew that other frequencies were broadcasting. He did not have the theological framework to name them, but he documented their effects. This is why Scripture consistently describes salvation in perceptual terms. The psalmist cries, "Open my eyes, that I may behold wondrous things out of your law." In the book of Kings, Elisha prays, "O Lord, please open his eyes that he may see." And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire. All around Elisha, the chariots were always there. The young man's spirit, receiver needed activation. Paul writes that the Father has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and transferred us into the kingdom of the Son he loves. The verb is past tense. Believers are already transferred into the kingdom while still walking the physical earth. Two kingdoms occupy the same spatial coordinates. Salvation is a shift in citizenship and perception. It is not merely a future geographical relocation. The 144,000 on Mount Zion are not a special bloodline. They are those whose receivers have been fully healed. They perceive God's reality with such clarity that they can learn a song no one else can sing. The song is not secret knowledge, it is a frequency. The unsealed cannot hear it, not because it is hidden, but because their receivers are still jammed. Chapter 5. Time is evidence of the counterfeit. In the garden, there was no need to measure time. Clocks, calendars, and the tracking of days exist because of decay. Time measurement is a technology of loss. You track what you are losing. You mark the years, because the years are taking something from you. The calendar is a ledger of depletion. The philosopher Martin Heidegger, in Being and Time, argued that human existence is fundamentally characterized by being toward death. We are the beings who know we will die. This knowledge structures everything we do. It creates urgency. It creates anxiety. It creates the frantic attempt to build meaning before the clock runs out. Heidegger was describing the experience of living inside the demiurge's frequency. He did not know it, but he described it perfectly. God is outside time. The garden operated on God's frequency, abundance, presence, no decay, no loss to measure. The demiurge's frequency introduced decay. With decay came the tyranny of the clock. The very existence of a wristwatch, a deadline, a retirement plan, these are symptoms of tuning to the counterfeit. The beast system runs on deadlines. The mark has an expiration. Buy and sell requires hours of operation. The mana economy has no clock. The mana falls. You gather. The sun sets. No watch required. The philosopher Henri Bergson distinguished between temps, clock time, measured time, the time of physics, and durée, lived duration. The experience of time is flow, as quality rather than quantity. Bergson argued that the mechanistic measurement of time is a distortion of real temporal experience. He was right. Clock time is the demiurge's time. It is time as loss, time as depletion, time as the countdown to death. Lived duration, the experience of flow, of presence, of the eternal moment, is a glimpse of God's time. Chapter 6. The declining lifespans. The book of Genesis records a measurable phenomenon that provides empirical support for the framework. Human lifespans decline across the narrative. They do not decline randomly. They decline in a pattern consistent with a strengthening broadcast. Adam lived 930 years. Seth lived 912 years. Enosh lived 905 years. Methuselah lived 969 years. Noah lived 950 years. After the flood, lifespans collapse. Abraham lived 175 years. Moses lived 120 years. David lived about 70 years. By the time of the psalmist, the norm is 80 years and 10, and if by reason of strength they be 80 years, yet is their strength labor and sorrow. Contemporary life expectancy in developed nations, despite all technological advances, hovers around the same span. This is not random biology. It is the progressive strengthening of the demiurge's broadcast. The lack lie that entered Eden with a whisper has been amplifying across history. The counterfeit frequency has been getting louder. Bodies designed for immortality are now crushed by decay within a single century. The broadcast is not static. It is escalating. This is why Revelation prophesies its final, catastrophic peak, the mark, the image, the global system, and its final, catastrophic defeat. The broadcast that has been growing since Eden will reach maximum volume, and then it will be silenced forever. End of part 1 of 4.